welcome Mary Burns, who's joining us today. She's going to give us a bit of a chat about the Ready Steady School program and where it's sort of moved to. So the Kids Cancer Project have been funding that project since January 2017. It's recently got some exciting collaborative funding and still going. And it gives us a real opportunity to, and one of our Kids Cancer Project funding priorities is around late effects and survivorship. So lots of children, adolescents and young adults with cancer have unique needs around education and vacation during and after their treatment, obviously, with many of them spending a lot of time in hospitals during treatment and needing schooling assistance, but also post their treatment, getting back to sort of educational work. It's a real challenging side effect, and with so many, we're really proud that so many children are surviving now childhood cancer. So 40 or 50 years ago it was 20 out of 100 kids. Now it's above 80, 85, 86%. So there is almost a epidemic of survival. So we have to make sure that we're giving these kids better and kinder treatments, which is one of the things we try to do. But the other is also assist them in with programs like that. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Mary, who's going to share her screen and take us through a little bit of a presentation on Ready Steady School and where it's got to. As I said, we started funding in January 2017, and we've committed now for the next few years through to 2024, and we're really excited where the program is going, and Mary's been leading it for a long time. So over to you, Mary, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you so much, Owen. Let me just share my screen. All right. So I just wanted to begin by thanking Owen for his thoughtful introduction. And hi to everybody tuning in today. I'm Mary. I'm a final year PhD student in psychology at the University of Sydney. And my PhD was made possible by the support of the Kids Cancer Project and a group of brilliant researchers and community members that have made it so wonderful a project to work on. Today I wanted to start by acknowledging the Dharawal people, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting to you today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So as Owen kindly pointed out, my PhD was born from a project named Ready Steady School that was led by Dr. Joe Fardell, and it focuses primarily on primary school aged cancer patients and survivors and supporting their education. Today I'll be talking about my work with adolescent cancer and adolescent cancer patients and survivors, and this project is called Ready Steady High School. Now, we're all here because we registered for a webinar, so we know how important education is. It's a predictor of better health, better social outcomes, and overall well-being. So what does this really have to do with cancer? Well, hopefully that's something that I'll be able to explain really well to you today. Again, as Owen mentioned, we're really fortunate to be living in a time where survival rates for child and adolescent cancer are surpassing 80%. So with this landmark, it's given us an opportunity to shift some of our research to focus on what happens after the cure. Well, after the cure, someone with cancer enters a phase called survivorship. It's important to note that not all survivors will face challenges to education. But the fact is that on average, adolescent cancer survivors don't graduate high school and further education at the same rate as their peers and their siblings. We also know that they have really specific support needs during adolescence because they're really distinct from children and they're distinct from adults. And with 2 to 3 cases per day in this age group, we're seeing more and more adolescents faced with education challenges. Research suggests that education is compromised, ironically, due to the life-saving treatments or damage done by the cancer itself. These young people face some significant side effects and late effects that challenge their education. They have cognitive side effects that impair concentration, memory, and planning. There's physical side effects like fatigue, weight gain, amputation, scarring, hair loss, vision loss that impact their self-image, their ability to learn, and their ability to relate to their peers. There are also logistic side effects like being in hospital, missing school, stopping them from being in the classroom, and making them feel isolated. Because of this, cancer in high school is known as the double penalty, meaning they face the challenges of adolescence and the complexities of cancer all at once. Teens can be left feeling disconnected, find it difficult to learn, or have a hard time reaching their academic potential. So naturally, you might be thinking, well, isn't there support available? And the short answer is yes, there's brilliant support available for education support for cancer survivors and patients in Australia. We have medical teams that have specialist staff. We have schools that are required to provide adjustments and disability provisions. We have charities that provide tuition, scholarships, and grants, and parents and caregivers that work tirelessly as advocates for their child's education. Research shows that accessing and using comprehensive support is beneficial to these teens. It improves social skills, advocacy skills, and confidence that they can meet their academic potential. So why do we continue to see this disparity? Well, that's because there are two critical roadblocks in Australia to accessing education support. The first is access. The second is information. So with access, these supports that I've mentioned aren't actually offered to all adolescent patients and survivors, meaning they're not being fully utilised. Furthermore, young people in rural areas often aren't connected in with support services. They tend to be located in metropolitan areas, and sometimes they disconnect with their teams that are able to tell them about the support. In terms of information roadblocks, parents need information that's relevant to their child's education support needs, but they often report feeling like they have to become experts in order just to understand, and many are performing hours of research to understand what support's available. Teachers, well, they're already overwhelmed with students' varying learning needs in their classrooms, and they report low confidence in their ability to understand the needs of adolescent cancer survivors and patients, and the strategies to support them. And finally, and probably most importantly, teen cancer patients and survivors do not have access to developmentally appropriate information about their education support options. And when they do, sometimes they don't feel, well, they feel hesitant to use these services because it makes them feel alienated from peers. In order to remove these roadblocks, my research worked in partnership with teen cancer patients and survivors, their parents, and their teachers. I asked them, what information do you need? And how can we improve access? With this talk, I'm going to present what teen cancer patients and survivors responded to these questions. Among the many topics covered, they mentioned they wanted to hear the stories of other teens that had been through it before. They wanted to know how to deal with cognitive impacts. And they wanted tips for connecting with friends. They also had very specific ideas about accessing support, preferring web-based video and web-based information. So, armed with this knowledge about information and access, we developed Ready Steady High School. The website provides access to support services and provides tailored information that teens are looking for. So how is this achieved? Well, the website is designed to grow with teens. It's designed to adapt to their information needs and to continually assess their support needs and direct them to pathways to access this support. I'm going to take you through a few clips of how a young person starts and navigates through this website so that you can see what this looks like. So first up, the young person lands at the landing page, and they can see already that this is a space that's dedicated to them. I also want to note that there are parent and educator portals. That's slightly out of the scope for today. So I'm just going to focus on what teens are accessing. So once they log in, they complete a tutorial and are directed to the About You tool. So I'll quickly show you what that looks like. So here's a young person, they're adding their email and their unique password, and they log in and they follow a little tutorial that teaches them about features. And then they arrive at the About You tool. So the About You tool is possibly one of the most crucial aspects of the website program. It removes roadblocks by building a profile about the young person based on their cancer type, their age, where they are in their journey, like whether they're at diagnosis or whether they're returning to school or they've been back at school for a while. And so this information is then fed into this program's algorithm. I'll show you what the About You tool looks like. Here's a young person adding their birth date, their location, information about where they're at school, their diagnosis and treatment details. And then all of this is kind of put together and they enter the second phase of the About You tool. So once the tool is complete, they begin to review, now that I'll show you, and curate the information the algorithm has recommended for them. So you'll see in the next clip, recommended info is already checked with a little green tick, and the young person can select or deselect information based on their preferences. So let's watch that happen. So now the young person's making their preferences. So you can see some of these are ticked, and they can untick it and select what they're looking for. They can also preview by clicking on this little eye icon to see, oh, what's this? What might this be about? So the young person goes through all these different categories of support items. And finally, it's complete. The About You tool is complete. They are then directed to their dashboard where this information is packaged and stored in their saved searches. So clicking on their saved searches, a young person can access this tailored information. Let me show you what that looks like now. So here's a person at their dashboard. They open their saved searches and look at all the categories of information that was relevant to them. You can also see here they can look, next time they log in, they can look at different searches that they've done. So they have a category a catalogue available to them of previous searches they've done. And at their dashboard, you can also see that they have the option to browse. Now, we included this option to account for teens who prefer to just cruise through and guide their own information seeking. And as you'll see, they basically have access to all of the information that the website can provide, and they can kind of go through it themselves based on the category of what they're looking for. So they'll open browse, they'll be taken to all the different categories. It stores all the information. They'll click on one and they'll search through it. It's also important to note that in order to facilitate, them remembering some of this information, we have a notes feature where they can save this information as well. So yes, we present information, as you can see, in a variety of formats. We present relevant topics that young people are interested in and that they told us about, like exams and assessments, talking about cancer, year 11 and year 12, returning to school, plus many, many more. And the topics are shown in bite-sized text with collapsible headings in a year 7 reading level, allowing a young person to digest information at their own rate. And it's also important to mention that it's available all in audio. So a young person can click an audio icon and everything can play out loud for them for whatever reason they may need to access it that way. I also wanted to mention that the website hosts information as a series of video stories. So young people can access the profiles of these wonderful 5 young cancer survivors who talk through their journey from diagnosis to school to challenges and supports, as well as providing advice. And I've provided a little bit of a mashup of all of their interviews just to give you a little bit of an overview. Now I'm just going to make sure that the audio will play. Share sound, perfect. So let's watch this.
So it was my birthday that month, so I just turned 16. So I was all excited to start driving, and then that sort of just shattered.
I ended up having to actually miss school, basically all of 8th grade, all of 9th grade, and half of 10th grade. So basically half of high school I missed. And at that time, I basically had to keep up with school from home because I was just too immunocompromised.
One of the challenges socially was just seeing on social media or Snapchat or Instagram or something, when you're stuck at home or in the hospital and you see your friends out at parties and things like that that you couldn't go to. And I think that was a pretty big challenge to just see what you're missing out on almost. But I think it's important to know that that's not too important considering what you're going through at the time. And there's always time for it once you're finished with treatment. So I don't feel like I missed out on that classic high school experience or anything in the end.
There's a little saying going around like chemo brain or chemo fog. Kind of just changes the way you, it affects your attention span. Just very hard to think, abstract thinking just goes out the window.
Voicing your expectations and what you actually need from people is really helpful. Although it's quite confronting, it's helpful for them to understand what you need as well, just because they haven't been through what you've been through, so they don't have the insight and the knowledge, and it's probably really tough for them to approach you and talk about it as well. But I think accepting how you feel and just knowing that it's okay to feel however you feel. If you don't want to talk about your experience, you don't have to. If you want to embrace it and for it to be something that's really beautiful, and you could even devote your life to it as well, just whatever you'd like to feel is okay.
Those are the wonderful young advisors that have helped also on this project. So a huge thank you to them. I wanted to make a last note on how Reddy City High School creates access to support services. Well, first of all, links to support are integrated throughout, which is a really great way of young people understanding what their challenges might be, and then going out and being able to find the support. We also have dedicated content and links. So we have this final page that catalogues all of the academic support available, just so that it's a really simple way for them to log on and go directly to support if that's what they're after. There's also links for emotional support, because we know that these things go hand in hand, as well as social support. So I wanted to conclude by saying that Reddy City High School has already made an impact. It's the world first in providing freely accessible, tailored education information and support for adolescent cancer patients and survivors. It's already been well received, and it's fit for purpose. It provides information in a way that young people feel that they can understand it, relate to it, and possibly be more inclined to act on it and use it. We know that one young person that's already previewed the website and given some feedback absolutely loved it. So this makes us feel like we're definitely on the right track. We know that it will provide a huge leap for consolidating education support services across Australia. We expect it to be a resource that informs parents who are already under a lot of stress and pressure, and provides formal links to education for teachers. Finally, we are finishing up some pilot testing, but the next stage is Australia-wide implementation trial, so that we can see how well and how acceptable this is to run just in general practice in oncology. And finally, we know that there's possible room for expansion, which is always really exciting, because there are other childhood and adolescent illnesses that might benefit from something really similar. I just wanted to say a really quick thank you to everyone that's been involved. My co-PhD supervisor, Dr. Jo Fidel, who is the leading researcher on Reddy City School and High School, as well as my PhD supervisor, Professor Sunny La, everybody from Youth Cancer Service, Australia-wide team. A huge shout out to my youth advisors who have been wonderful, have bared their souls and have been so involved. And then last but not least, a huge thank you to the Kids Cancer Project, who makes projects like this possible and is making education accessible for every child with cancer. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. We'll obviously take questions, but I'll start with maybe the first one. It's wonderful just to see a PhD candidate having such an impact in the childhood cancer space, obviously with a wide team, but leading this with Joanna. Just to give a background, there's obviously a lot of research involved. You've got a website, the amount of information you have to put together. As you said, you have an advisory panel. You've got to recruit these kids from both locally and nationally. You've had a pilot study. There's continuous improvement in your program, and you're always working to improve it. So it's really exciting to hear that Australia-wide implementation, because that's what, obviously it started off as more of a local program, and now it's translating to something that can be used across the country, which is really exciting. But there is a lot of work behind all that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's just been a phenomenal amount of work that has been going on for the past, I think, 4 years. But yeah, absolutely. I think we've done a lot of reviewing of and understanding the literature, as well as trying to co-produce something with these young people and their support systems. But yeah, that's just been a mammoth effort. Yeah.
So I've got a question from Pete, has put one up on the chat. How can our hospital team be involved in the implementation trial?
That's such a wonderful question, Pete. And that's actually something that we're asking during the pilot phase. So we know that when we spoke to medical teams, they're on the forefront, they're involved in diagnosis, and they're often the first point of call for linking young people into support services. So we've asked them, how do you think is a good way to actually introduce a resource like this to young people? Because we know that at diagnosis, often the focus really is on the child's health and keeping them healthy. And then school becomes something that then takes a little bit more focus when the child is kind of settled in their treatment. So we think that this is something we'll really need to do hand in hand and get the advice of medical teams as well as families and teachers. But we think that it might be something that will be provided as a link or through like care packages that are provided to these young people once they're sort of settled into their cancer treatment and are medically stable. Yeah.
So another quick question. Exciting to hear it's a world first. Is there opportunities for some of this research or the understandings to go global?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We know that the experience of young people is very similar across the globe. We have collaborations with some wonderful researchers in the US as well as the UK. And their young people also face some of these barriers to like tailored support. So in the future, we really do hope that this is something, and it's something that can be easily translated because it's online, because it's so accessible and it can be tailored so nicely to different countries and different contexts. So yeah, we really do aim to make this as accessible as possible. So great question.
Is a good question. So obviously with so much feedback and getting the parents and kids involved, there's a real buy-in in the fact that you're doing the right thing, that you've sort of almost getting a tick of approval. So getting that feedback, I suppose, is really important, saying it's terrific with all the information. And as I said, it's obviously a continual improvement. When someone gives you some feedback, you can improve and tinker with it, but it's a wonderful program that we've been very happy to support for the last 4 to 5 years, and as I said, another couple to go. So thank you very much for joining us, Mary, today. I think that was it for our live questions, but very, very interesting to hear what the program entails and how the impact it's having. So obviously, we said at the outset, it's important for us to get better treatments and less side effects, but there is still several light side effects that you went through, and this program allows them to have a bit of help, which is really great.
That is wonderful. And I did want to say a huge thank you again to everyone that has shown an interest and has made this possible, because it really does have everybody's voice included. So yeah, thank you, Owen. And I'm happy also, you can see my contact details here. If you want to send me an email or reach out to me on Twitter, I'm happy to answer any other questions that anybody comes up with later.
Lovely. All right, that's a wrap for today for a quick half an hour. So Mary, thanks for joining us. Very informative chat, and we, as I said, love supporting the team and the wonderful work you're doing. So look forward to the next few years and an update down the track, and we can see some wonderful impact. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. That's the end today of our Behind the Science webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much.